evening and welcome to our COVID-19 update. I am Ladi Akeredoluale. Here are the highlights at this hour. United Kingdom announces what it says is a COVID-19 treatment drug showing life-saving capacities to treat severe cases of the virus. However, the NCDC says the drug has not been approved by the WHO or the Nigerian authorities for treatment. Federal government and resident doctors' conciliation meeting ends in a deadlock. And Lagos State government reverses position, says churches and mosques must remain closed till further notice, citing rising COVID-19 caseload. We begin tonight with news that ordinarily should be cheered because scientists in the United Kingdom think they have come across what they are referring to as a breakthrough in the search for a cure for COVID-19 in a cheap and widely available drug called Dexamethasone. The drug is part of the world's biggest trial testing existing treatments to see if they work for coronavirus. It cut the risk of death by a third for patients on ventilators, while for those on oxygen, it cut the rate of deaths by a fifth. Though hailed by the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson as a genuine case for celebration, the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, the NCDC, in a tweet late this evening on its media handle, says it has not approved the drug as a cure for COVID-19, and neither has it been validated by the World Health Organization. Let's talk to our correspondent in the British capital, London, Juliana Olayinka. Good evening, Juliana. This ordinarily ought to be pure, unadulterated good news. What can you tell us about the situation regarding this drug in the UK?
Laddie, you know what the British tabloids are like, and already they're calling this discovery a £5 wonder drug. And it really is, you know, the implications of these findings are huge. Prime Minister Boris Johnson was delivering the daily coronavirus briefing a couple of hours ago, and he did not mince his words when he said that this is the biggest breakthrough the world has seen for COVID-19, and he was happy that it had come out of Britain and it was by British scientists. And what I believe has baffled all of the medical professionals here in the UK is that this drug has been on the cabinet for several years. It's been around since the 1960s. It's typically used to decrease inflammation. People can use it if you have a brain tumor. People have been using it if you have asthma or arthritis. And as you said, you know, the whole world has been scrambling to try and either create a vaccine or try to find some sort of cure for COVID-19. And there have been several high-profile drugs, including hydroxychloroquine, that have been put into the mix. But this is the first one that actually has results. There have actually been visible statistics that have shown that if some patients use this, I believe it's 1 in 8. If you use this, then you will survive. So it's an absolutely great breakthrough. I did hear what you were saying about authorities in Nigeria tweeting that it's not a cure. It isn't a cure. That's not what the medical professionals here in Britain are saying. But what they are saying is that it does reduce mortality, and it has just been discovered. So it will be interesting to see how the World Health Organization follow up on this breakthrough.
While other authorities, other health authorities that you just alluded to, the World Health Organization and indeed individual national health authorities look into this drug in the coming days, would it be correct to say that it can start being used immediately in the UK?
Absolutely. Dexamethasone, got to make sure I get that right because I'm sure we'll be saying it quite a lot over the next couple of weeks. Boris Johnson, when he spoke earlier today, he did say that, you know, the NHS are ready to use it. They have been using it. It was a huge trial of about 2,100 patients, and they have been trialing it. Again, it also has been stockpiled by the NHS. Of course, we're going through our own national crises here at the moment, which is Brexit. So even before the pandemic had taken over the world, Britain had already been stockpiling medicine. Now they know that this could potentially save so many lives. They're making it available for everybody. And I think as well, what's really important, especially for the international community, is that price point. We're talking about £5 in Britain for a course of dosage. It will probably cost about £40. But if you're in a place such as India or Pakistan, that could potentially cost pennies. And I think it's the cost that's really important, because, of course, there are so many lessons that have been learned from Ebola and how much the pharmaceutical companies would have had to dip into their pockets. This isn't the case with this drug. It's readily available on the NHS, and Boris Johnson was pretty clear in saying the NHS will be using it now. I believe there is enough to treat about 200,000 individuals in the UK.
Dexamethasone, that is, as you say, a word that we're all going to have to learn how to pronounce in the days coming ahead. Thank you very much, Juliana, for that update, and do continue to stay safe out there. Correspondent Juliana Olayinka.
Thank you, Ladu.
Out of London, back here in Nigeria, at the meeting between the resident doctors and the Minister of Labour and Employment, Dr. Chris Ngige, has ended in a deadlock as the striking doctors refused to reconvene after the meeting went on a recess. The president of the National Association of Resident Doctors, the NARD, told Channels Television via a phone call that the union already made its position known to the government and has no need to reconvene for further discussions. According to him, the resident doctors already told the Labour Minister that once they see tangible evidence, a meeting of their members will be convened to reconsider their industrial action. However, Dr. Ngige, who spoke to journalists after the meeting, insisted that it was fruitful as most of the doctors' demands were being resolved. In Lagos State, the government has announced the immediate suspension of the planned reopening of religious houses and places of worship. Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, who announced this at a briefing earlier in the day, explained that the decision was taken in line with the ongoing evaluation of evolving scenarios regarding the course of the infection in the state. Besides places of worship, Governor Sanwo-Olu also emphasized that social and event centers, as well as social clubs, will remain closed for now, based on the corresponding public health advisory guidelines issued by the experts.
In the most recent guidelines issued on the gradual easing of lockdown, following the advice of the Presidential Task Force, I noted that we would shortly be permitting restriction on religious houses on the condition of strict compliance with the detailed guidelines issued earlier by the State Safety Commission. We have had to, over the last week and a half, had to continue to monitor the trend, had to continue to study the level of preparedness and level of engagement that we've had with these stakeholders. We will not be proceeding with the opening of the places of worship as been said earlier for the 19th and 21st. We will be suspending it until further notice. We critically had to have a thorough review of where we are as a state and our condition. Our review indicates that we needed to suspend that attempt of opening. And so, gentlemen of the press, we will be seeking your cooperation to communicate effectively that the opening of religious homes that were due for this weekend has been put on hold, and we will not be opening them this weekend any longer. Social events, event centers, social clubs all still remain closed. For emphasis, all of them still remain closed. They have not been opened, but however, the processes of issuance of provisional safety clearance, that have been recorded through the registration portal on LSG safetyreg.com. They should continue to explore that portal. It's not suspended. People should continue to register and continue to comply with all of the procedures of easing it. But we're not ready yet to open any of these houses. Let me also make it clear that we are now fully in the phase of what we will consider as personal responsibility regarding this pandemic. So this means that, like we've also said, we all need to take full responsibility for ourselves and for our loved ones. And that's why government continues to engage all of our various stakeholders. Over this last weekend, there were meetings with religious bodies, there were meetings with our traditional rulers, there were meetings with some of the organized service sector, all to carry ourselves along and to explain to them where we are with the current pandemic.
The Imo State House of Assembly has been shut down for the next 2 weeks following the announcement that a lawmaker has tested positive to the coronavirus in the state. The chairman of the COVID-19 task force in Imo State, Professor Maurice Iwu, disclosed this while briefing newsmen in Owerri, the state capital. He said samples of all other lawmakers and their aides have been taken to the laboratory for testing to be able to ascertain the number of people who might have come in contact with the lawmaker who tested positive. Our correspondent, Itokwe Kutei in Owerri, has more on these and other stories from that state.
Following the announcement that a lawmaker in the Imo State House of Assembly tested positive to COVID-19, the State House of Assembly complex has been shut down for the next 2 weeks. This is to enable government to fumigate the premises and ensure proper contact tracing and isolation procedure. The chairman of the COVID-19 task force in Imo State, Professor Maurice Iwu, disclosed that the lawmaker in question has been asked to go into isolation with his wife to contain the spread of the virus, while samples of the lawmakers in the Imo State House of Assembly and their aides have been taken to the laboratory for testing.
The House of Assembly is shut for 2 weeks to enable us to fumigate the place and also to allow the members to be on self-isolation or observation until we know whether they are positive or negative. Like we said earlier, we are following a laid-out strategic plan based on recognizing that this COVID-19 is not only a health emergency, but it's also a social emergency. So that while we are trying to make sure that we take care of the public health crisis, we also do everything we can to prevent a breakdown of the social order or be able to maintain the social harmony. So social harmony is very important in the strategic plan that we have in tackling this epidemic or this pandemic now.
With a total of 760 samples already taken in the state, and a total of 136 confirmed cases of the coronavirus disease, the state government is still appealing to indigents to continue to comply with the precautionary measures and protocols put in place by the government to contain the spread of the coronavirus disease. From Owerri, the Imo State capital, Itokwe Kutei for COVID-19 update.
From Imo State to Kano, where the state government has been speaking on the mysterious deaths that have ravaged the state in the last 1 month. Speaking while taking the report of a committee set up to investigate the cause of the deaths, which occurred earlier in the pandemic period, the governor, Dr. Abdullahi Ganduje, explained that about 15% of the death ratio was COVID-related. He attributes some of the causes to other underlying diseases such as malaria, diabetes, and high blood pressure.
Technical committee from the Federal Ministry of Health indicating that 60% of the mysterious deaths was related to COVID-19. I think all the variables they indicated sadly lack correlation. And in fact, their data cannot pass the test of reliability and validity. And once a research finding cannot pass the test of validity and reliability, you can as well throw away that investigation into an ocean, signifying nothing, reporting nothing, and misleading almost everybody. This investigation shows us that, yes, even though there was no practical examination in our laboratories, but applications, inferences from credible sources involving both primary and secondary data, I think there is no better way of conducting this research.
Governor Abdullahi Ganduje of Kano speaking about the report on the mysterious deaths that occurred in his state earlier on in the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, Oyo State, one of the nation's 36 states, announced yesterday that primary 6 pupils, junior secondary school students in year 3, and senior secondary students in their final year will be resuming on June the 29th, 2020. While the federal government is also considering the resumption of junior and senior secondary school students so that the students can finish their exams, it is yet to settle on a suitable date for the resumption of such school activities. Different online and digital learning platforms have been introduced, but not so much has been said about tertiary education. Well, let's take a look at that sector, shall we, and how it can survive under the COVID-19 era. I'm now being joined via Skype from the Dolphin Estate in Ikoyi area of Lagos by a senior lecturer at the College of Medicine, University of Lagos. She's also a consultant public health physician, Dr. Alera Roberts. Good evening, Dr. Roberts. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Tertiary education, on the face of it, would look like the simpler part of the education matrix to tackle, because here you're talking about young adults. How do you think that sector is preparing? I mean, you are one of the lecturers in such an institution. How do you think they are preparing for this? Because eventually they will still have to open.
Yes, of course, Ladi, they will have to open. Sadly, as you know, the universities have been on strike since February, before even the lockdown started. And many of the issues that we're on strike about have not even been resolved satisfactorily. However, there's definitely a move globally towards more work from home, more online learning. However, again, this throws up a lot of challenges because there are a lot of students who don't have the necessary wherewithal to be able to carry out online learning. I mean, this is presupposing that you have the data, you have the equipment, you have the devices, and this is both from the students level, at the level of the lecturers, and even at the level of the institutions. Because, you know, when I'm teaching a class of medical students and I'm saying, I give them a fact, and I'm telling them, Google it. Now you can see there's an automatic divide in the classroom between the haves and the have-nots. Because the haves will automatically bring out a nice, cute smartphone, and they've got data on their phone to be able to Google the facts. But the others don't. And this leads to a lot of problems because we now have a kind of divide in the classroom as we're teaching, and it's not fair. Then you've got also the issue of lecturers our universities really don't meet the matrix in terms of one lecturer to 40 students, or one lecturer to even, 40 is even high, 20 or 30 students. We've been asked to move to small group teaching. We don't have the wherewithal to be able to teach that many students by this method. So there are a lot of issues that have to be dealt with before we can technically say that we are ready to cope with this.
Coleman, I'm going to be asking you about the last point you made, which is the student and classroom sizes, because that's part of what would prove to be problematic in the long run. So please stay with us, Dr. Roberts. We'll take a break at this point. When we come back from that break, we'll discuss a bit more about this. Thanks for staying tuned and welcome back to our COVID-19 update. Let's return to Dr. Alera Roberts in the Ikoyi area of Lagos. Dr. Roberts, before we took the break, you mentioned something about small groups, teaching in small groups. That brings me to the issue of infrastructure. Anybody who has been to some of Nigeria's universities in the last decade or so would see that for some classes, students have filled the class and they're hanging at the windows and so on. Now, with the issue of social distancing, which is what we've been preaching in the last 4 months or thereabouts, aren't we going to need more classrooms if we're going to do this?
That's a very simplistic way of looking at it, Ladi. More classrooms also means more teachers. Do we have more teachers? It means teaching round the clock. Can we afford to teach round the clock? Power is an issue. Ventilation is an issue. So there are so many factors to this that I don't think it has been well thought out. And these are some of the issues that we've been fighting about for decades, getting on to decades. It's actually becoming quite tiresome. You know, and these are things we need to look at. In fact, somebody had on our platform had put up a very cogent argument, which I must confess I totally agreed with. Call off the strike and let us run the universities the way the NUC says they should be run, and which means that I would teach only 40 students, no matter how many are admitted into the university. I would supervise only 10 or 6 or 4 projects, no matter how many are assigned to. Because there's no such thing as an excess workload allowance being paid. But the truth of the matter is, look at where we are today. Everybody's talking about, oh, we want a homegrown solution. Oh, why aren't we looking at some of our local herbs and medicaments for this? Where are the scientists? You don't go to a supermarket and pluck scientists off the shelf. We need to have established scientists that are doing this work, who are engaged in research and service delivery over decades. It's not something we do overnight. And this is what we've been advocating for. When you look at many of these studies that are being churned out all over the world, the new Dexamethasone result that has been found, you will find that Nigerians are involved at all levels. These are the same Nigerians that we can be teaching here, that are probably being taught here. But they go over there and they thrive in that environment because we do not have an enabling environment here. So yes, we can spout all these things and do a copy and paste from what is going on in the world, but you can't copy and paste onto a non-existent framework.
Basically, what you're saying, Dr. Roberts, is, if I understand you properly, is that the chickens appear to have come home to roost, and that what COVID-19 has done is to re-emphasize where the problems have always been.
Laddie, I knew I sent you to school and paid good school fees. Yes, the chickens have definitely come home to roost. You cannot have national development without the twin engines of health and education, or shall I put it properly, education and health. So here we are, and many of us are involved in both sectors, because every one of us in the public health field are involved in both education and health at all levels. We teach from the community to the university. But if we are not empowered or enabled to do our jobs, there's very little you're going to get out. And this is what we are seeing. The chickens have definitely come home to roost.
But the students in the tertiary institutions who will be listening to you now may come away with the impression that, oh dear, what COVID-19 has done is to effectively put an end, in more ways than one, to what we know as tertiary education.
Oh no! These students that we have in our tertiary institutions today are what we call digital natives. They were born into a world of digital communication. So they are looking at what is going on locally, and they are also looking at what is going on in the world, and they are empowering themselves and upskilling themselves. We are the ones who need to be in a position to guide them aright, but the country will lose them, because as soon as they find their way to enabling environments, they will be gone and they are not coming back. And this is what we've been talking about. We've had this brain drain, we've talked about it, we've lamented, we've complained, we've cried out, and now some of us are just falling silent. But the youth, they will get ahead. It's their world.
Dr. Roberts, again, I can only wish that what you're saying was different. But one would hope that somehow we'll muddle through this especially with COVID-19 standing in the background. But thank you so much for being our guest this evening. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you, Ladi, and we will get to the other side of this, trust me.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Nigeria's total confirmed COVID-19 cases is now moving towards 17,000. It currently stands at 16,658 over the last 24 hours. According to the Niger Center for Disease Control, the NCDCs, there are 10,885 active cases, 5,349 patients have recovered, and 424 deaths have been recorded. Lagos State remains the epicenter in the country and in the southwest region, with cases standing at 7,319, followed by the FCT in the north central with 1,264 cases, while Kano leads in the northwest with 1,158 cases. Edo still leads in the south-south with 620 cases, Borno in the northeast with 439 cases, and Abia State tops the list in the southeast with 173 cases. Moving to Borno State in the northeast, which is, of course, leading in that zone with confirmed COVID-19 cases. The University of Maiduguri is putting measures in place in preparation for a possible return of students should the federal government declare that schools should open. The management, through a committee, is seeking ways to curtail the spread of the coronavirus through sensitization as well as practical means. The university is laying down protocols that students would be expected to follow up on upon resumption to keep them and their campus safe.
Population of about 45,000. UNIMAID shut down in the month of March on the eve of its end of first semester examination on account of the coronavirus pandemic. The university has the capacity to accommodate an estimated 11,000 students in both the male and female hostels on campus, and that figure represents a little over 20% of the total number of students in the university. This is also in accordance with the regulation of the National Universities Commission that at least 20% of the total population of students must be accommodated on campus. Now, if only 11,000 students are accommodated, that should take care of the issue of social distancing in the hostels. Now, also as part of measures by the university against the spread of the coronavirus, the school now has a COVID-19 intervention committee. We have been talking to the chairman of that committee, and we hear that they have produced thousands of face masks, a large volume of hand sanitizers, liquid hand wash, and the rest of them. We also understand that part of the mandate of that committee is to advise the management on safety measures to adopt when the school eventually reopens. From the OAU works in the University of Maiduguri, I am Blessing Tuno Aso for COVID-19 updates.
All right, thank you, Blessing from the Borno State capital, Maiduguri. Let's talk to our correspondent, Olu Phillips, who is in Lagos, and he's been checking out some of the pointers that we were speaking to Dr. Roberts, and which Blessing, of course, also made reference to from Maiduguri earlier on. Good evening, Olu. Where exactly are you reporting from tonight?
Hi, Ladi. At the front of University of Lagos, as they choose to say, the University of First Choice in Akoka, Lagos, Ladi.
Now, given that the fact, I mean, I'm looking behind you and I can see that there isn't the frenetic pace of activity that usually is, even at this time when the school is in full swing. But there are issues, as Dr. Roberts pointed out earlier on in the program, there are issues. We're taking a look at the fact that should tertiary institutions be allowed to open, what would they need to put in place? What have they been trying to put in place? I mean, this has been on now for several months. What have you found?
Okay, Ladi, this is it. I mean, when I heard about the possibility of allowing, say, the tertiary institutions to come back and resume. I was one of the persons that leaped for joy because some of these guys have consumed a lot of food at home. I want them to just begin to go back to universities. Then again, we looked at the possibility in view of the Presidential Task Force's directives on COVID-19. And I said to myself, this cannot be realistic, because I visited some of the schools. I visited the University of Lagos earlier today, and I can tell you, the numbers are going up, yes, and we're trying to bring those numbers down. But I don't think it's the right time really for the universities to, or any tertiary institution for that matter, to resume. Because, for instance, if you take University of Lagos, for instance, size of classroom is a factor as regards keeping 2 meters. Yes, you can enforce the face mask thing. But how about how you get sitting arrangements? We have admitted more students in most of the public universities or institutions than the capacity of the institutions. Make no mistakes about it, this has been the trend over the last 2 decades. Now, there's another factor. You look at a school like University of Lagos that has a campus shuttle. The campus shuttle before now used to have 3 people at the back and 1 in front. In the name and in the directive of COVID-19 prevention, you're going to have that reduced, and that means you will need more buses to convey more people going in and out from the school gates into their faculties. Now, who also will pay this, the differential if you talk about subventions, which universities always complain that they do not have? Lecturers, for instance, if you're not, say, a doctor or a professor, you may not have a room, a staff room to yourself. Where 2 lecturers share a room, are you beginning to see, we've not seen partitionings in some of those rooms. How do you control that really? Hostels, laddie, hostels. You know that the statutory thing to do is to admit 4 people in a hostel. That in itself is a problem, having 4 people in a room. Let alone the fact that we do know that over years, up till today, we do not have just 4 people in the hostels. So if you're able to enforce that in the classrooms, in the walkways, at the gate, at the entry level, at the bursary, at the student union, students affairs, and all of those places where there's daily contact, what happens in the hostel? We're going to see students who would even share face masks. These people are students, they don't have all the monies. And where you have 5, 6, 7 persons in a room, how do you enforce bedspread sharing, bed space sharing, bathroom usage? We've been told that this COVID-19 stays on surfaces for some time. How often are you going to disinfect these surfaces, these rooms, these hostels, let alone those who stay off campus? How do you ensure this? How do you enforce this so that those outside don't bring it into the school? Laddie, this is a lot of questions that have not been answered from what we can see today in the institutions and higher learning centers that we visited.
Thank you very much, Olu Phillips, for that reporting. Of course, we'll be expecting that some of the answers to those questions will come from the administrators of those institutions, particularly when it becomes clear that some form of life will have to return to some of those campuses in the days ahead. Our correspondent, Olu Phillips, reporting from the University of Lagos, Akoka, this evening. For the latest on the COVID-19 pandemic and its effects on all sectors of national life in the United States, let's go to the United States, where I'm being joined on the program by an epidemiologist who is also a public health practitioner, Professor Sherry Adeosun. She joins us from New York. Professor Adeosun, thank you for your time and welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
We've been discussing, taking a look at some of the perspectives of Nigeria's education system. Today we were talking about tertiary education and the fact that we might find it a bit easier to deal with young adults than we would with small children and all that. What's the situation in the United States? Because that's a system that is also opening up after quite a scare, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Even though we can say the curve has flattened, but the situation right now is we have different university meeting and making decisions on how and when they should open. So the decision across the board varies. We have universities like University of New York, which is one of the largest private universities in the United States. They are deciding to open and have a face-to-face come fall. And we have other universities like the California State universities that have over 500,000 students they catered for. They have 23 universities. They are not opening until like summer of 2021. So because you can notice that the different part of United States were affected differently. So the decision to open varied across United States.
Now, let's talk about the broader pandemic. I don't know if you've heard about what is being called the good news from the United Kingdom, dexamethasone, this evening. Some are saying, so it was there all along, we just weren't looking. Is that resonating in the United States, do you think?
No, not really. In the United States, we're still looking at the different, waiting for different research results to come out. So there's really no like a miracle thing that has to be done to be able to like resolve the situation we're in. Until there's actually a vaccination, I don't really think we can actually be sure and say everything is resolved when it relates to COVID-19.
The United States still has the highest number of deaths worldwide. It also has the highest number of confirmed cases by far worldwide. What's the situation as at today? What can you tell us about what's going on?
Okay, the situation as at today in the United States, we have over 2 million cases in the United States and about 116,000 deaths. You know, the most areas is flattening down right now. We're able to like go out. We had like different phases of resumption of work. The essential workers are going out and people in different industry are actually back at work, but they still have to maintain social distancing, which is some of the things that even the universities in Nigeria all around the world, when they make decisions to open, they have to think of the social distancing, the health and the safety of the student and of the faculty, and also contact tracing. You know, and some universities are putting in place things like testing, regular testing for COVID-19, because without really testing effectively, you can't really know if this disease is spreading or is stopping. So that's one thing I found, a disparity across not just America, across the globe, that different countries are testing at a different rate at a different time. And that will affect the numbers that we're getting back. Because the more you test, the more numbers you're going to have. Just like in the United States, initially, we were not testing at the beginning, like early March, there was not really that much testing going on. But as soon as we started to do testing, more people were being confirmed as having COVID-19. Because we have to always remember there are people that will have it, but will not really show symptoms. And there will be some that will have it, and it can be really fatal.
Frontline health workers, those who are actually doing the treatment, the treating of people who come up, who probably have symptoms, may not have symptoms, but who deal with the whole case management process for COVID-19. What's the situation with them? Because in quite a number of countries, including Nigeria here, we do hear of fatalities amongst them, confirmed cases amongst them, and that sometimes is put down to the issue of lack of access to personal protective equipment. Is that the case in the U.S.?
It not really happened like at the beginning. Because I felt like the government didn't really like take COVID-19 issues seriously as they should have. So there was some equipment that should have got into the healthcare worker early on that didn't. But, you know, within a couple of weeks, the situation was resolved. All the healthcare workers got the protective equipment that they needed. And then we didn't really have that much death rate in America when it relates to our healthcare workers compared to places like Italy. Because those things were put in place, you know. So situation right now is, as we know, the number of people that are sick with COVID-19 is reducing. And that also has a negative effect in the sense that people that are like sick have other healthcare problems like diabetes, hypertension that need to be maintained. They are afraid to go to the hospital, you know, because they feel like I don't want to catch COVID-19. So, so other things have to be put in place. There's campaign going on to encourage people. You still have to come. There's still something that is going on in your body. It's important for you to do your due diligence. You know, I understand people are afraid to go to the hospital because they don't want to be exposed. There's so many myths and so many information out there going on. Like if you go to the hospital, they're going to say you're positive, and when you're not positive. So I just want to encourage everyone. It's important to take care of your health. COVID-19 or no COVID-19, if you have a diagnosis that needs to be maintained and you need a maintenance medication, please contact your doctor and do your due diligence.
Just before I let you go, I must ask this, because going forward now, I know that the United States is opening up, like many other parts of the world, back after the state of lockdown that the world found itself in the immediate aftermath of COVID-19.
Yes.
It's always been a balance between life and livelihoods. How is that balance panning out as things are opening up? Are we having more cases there like we are having here?
Yes, in certain part of the country, when things opened up, states that opened up earlier than other states, for different states were opening up at different time because the pandemic hit the different state at different time. So those that opened up early, there were a few cases of a spike. It wasn't anything really crazy, but there have been cases of number increase in the cases of COVID-19, which is expected. But if we continue to maintain social distancing, continue to wear our gloves and wash our hands, that is really, really an important thing that we have to put in place. And I do not want to leave your presence without remembering our young people getting out of high school, going to college, to university. You know, I know it's not like a normal season that we're in, but I just want to encourage you, be resilient, continue to push, don't give up. You know, the situation is changing. Try to change and try to adapt with it. There's greatness in each and every one of you. That's our college students.
Thank you so much.
And
That's a good
university
point. That's a good point at which to leave it. Professor Sharia Dioshu, epidemiologist and public health practitioner, joined us on Skype from New York in the United States. Thank you for that note of optimism in ending, and thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you. Have a nice evening, everyone.
Before we take a break, let's take this story, still talking about tertiary education, back in the country, but this time from Amina, the Niger State capital, where our correspondent, Emperor Simon, says that all schools there are still under lock and key, but authorities at the Federal University of Technology in Amina say that they are in preparation for reopening.
On a normal day, you would have at least 200 students sitting in this lecture hall at the Federal University of Technology, Mina, to receive lecture. But today, that's not the case. The classroom is empty. Now, even if the university resumes, what will likely happen is that that number of students may be reduced to at least half in the classroom. We spoke with the Vice Chancellor of the university, Professor Abdullahi Bala, on some of the measures that the management of the university is thinking of adopting should schools resume.
We are looking at different scenarios. The worst case scenario is where they cannot come back. We have to go online. We cannot continue staying at home doing nothing. So we are looking at that eventuality. That's the worst case scenario. That where they do not come back, what are those things we need to do? We have to deliver lectures, we have to conduct examinations. So we have to look at that platform. But if they are able to come back, for example, yes, we are now looking at how to promote the social distancing and the other health protocols. And in doing that, then we have to start thinking out of the box. We have to make sure that classrooms, lecture theaters are not overcrowded. We have to make sure that hostels are not overcrowded. So these are some of the issues that we are confronted with and we have to contend with. But as far as we are concerned, we are comfortable and we are confident that we'll be able to overcome all these challenges.
There is no doubt that the COVID-19 pandemic has redefined the way people now live their lives, and the tertiary education subsector is not an exception. From the Federal University of Technology, Mina Boso campus, Emperor Simon for COVID-19 update.
Thank you, Emperor. Let's go back to the United States now and talk to our correspondent there, Maria Bird. Maria, a mix of earlier reopenings and disregard for personal safety measures have prompted researchers to increase their projections of COVID-19 deaths this summer. Sorry, let me start by welcoming you and hoping that you're keeping safe. I was so anxious to get into that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
What are those projections for this summer?
Well, we're looking at potentially by October, the new projection models that came out just a few hours ago are about 200,000 people potentially could have died as a result of COVID-19. We know we're already well over 2 million. So what does that mean? We're going to hit 3 million. I think that people are at this point guessing when it comes to the number of cases because obviously more tests are becoming available. And so when you have greater number of tests, what does that mean? That means greater numbers of potential individuals that are going to come up positive, especially with the recent protests in the U.S., many states were urging those protesters to go and get tested. So you could potentially see a spike as a result of those areas as well. But the bigger issue is, yes, the cases, but the potential deaths that we're potentially looking at in the United States. And again, if a second shutdown has to happen in the U.S., that will drastically impact the already volatile economy.
Now, you talked about the possible second shutdown. What could possibly lead to that?
If we see spikes, I mean, we're seeing spikes in Texas. We're seeing areas like Arizona. You know, there was a lot of conversation early on about the fact that COVID-19 adversely impacted the African American and minority communities. And yes, we know dealing with underlying conditions does adversely affect those individuals who contract COVID-19. But when you're looking at areas like Arizona and you're talking about, you know, it's not as urban, it's not environments that you would typically expect to see COVID-19, much like New York, where we saw heavy impact of COVID-19 in New York, very urban area, close-knit individuals together. But when you see this happening in the middle of the United States, it calls to question, are we going to begin to see spikes as many of the more urban environments begin to go to a phased reopening approach? So we know already that close to 22 states have shown extreme spikes.
Is there any way that this issue of the models about what could possibly happen about the spiking of number of cases could also be impacted by the fact that there's increased, better access to testing for this virus now?
Yes. Now, the testing is 100% helping us to be able to better identify the number of cases. But when you talk about the number of hospital beds that are needed, and as I was mentioning, Arizona, who is, you know, looking for more hospital beds to be able to address those individuals who are having the severe impact of COVID-19, because we know many people don't have severe to the point where they have to be hospitalized. And so those are the concerns. Are we going to continue to see, or are we going to start to see spikes in hospitalization, and obviously, which could potentially lead to deaths?
Thank you so much, our correspondent Maria Bird. Thank you for that update from the United States, and please continue to stay safe, even within all the gloomy and grim statistics that people are projecting. Thank you so much for your reporting.
Thank you so much.
You can find full update on COVID-19 situation reports and also infection prevention and control recommendations during healthcare when COVID-19 is suspected on the website of the Niger Center for Disease Control, the NCDC. On the website of the World Health Organization, you'll find advice for the public, health workers, country and technical guidance, as well as other research and development information on COVID-19. And our website, channelstv.com, has more details on the meeting between the federal government and the striking resident doctors, which ended in a deadlock this evening, plus other top stories. Do visit channelstv.com. Thank you for being a part of COVID-19 Update tonight. I am Ladi Akiri Doluale. Good night.